and stop putting bandaids over bullet holes and actually let us actually like suture it up. You know, we just continually have to have people tell us their stories over and over again. I don't think people realize the impact it has for the person who's receiving that story. When we're asking people to tell us their most traumatic self, the most traumatic stories, we're asking the person also to hear these stories and secondary trauma. And then we're experiencing our own thing. And that creates sometimes trying to cope by substances or cope by behaviors. And we're asking and we're looking at why are these people who are serving the community, why are they struggling? Why are they doing all of these things on outside? Because we have to hear everybody's trauma every day. 5 days a week, 6 days a week. I know for me, I work 7 days a week. So it's not just working with my organization. I work with other organizations. I do community work. But when you tell me your story day after day after day, and you don't expect me to have burnout, but you still want me to show up, and that's not including the things that are happening in the community with murders. That's not including you're watching inequities. That's not including working in systems, trying to get money from systems, being in systems yourself. And we don't make enough money to just, do what we need to do for ourselves because we hear self-care as a buzzword, but yet we're still expected to show up.
I have a homegirl who said self-care is a response to state violence. Like, we shouldn't have to live in a society where we have to intentionally carve out time to take care of ourselves. We should live in a society, in a culture that we're already taking care of. I just keep going back to the Adrian Marie, like, trust the people and they'll be trustworthy. And I think that a lot of us gain trust because of how quickly we were able to mobilize, but also provide people with dignity. Like dignified resources, dignified experiences, dignified moments. Because a lot of these things, like you said, like what is dignified about enrolling a child into a 5-week program, getting their hopes up, getting them resources, and then cutting them off at the end of 5 weeks because we don't have anything else? Like, what is dignified about that kind of plan? Like, I think about our communities and about this like the dignity, and what does it mean to provide a service that's dignified, right? Or have an interaction that's dignified. You were saying earlier about like when these grants ask about how are you doing on diversity, inclusion, and equity, and I'm like, I'm gonna one up you actually. I'm not working on diversity, equity, or inclusion. I'm working on healing and liberation and justice. Like, I'm not interested. I was like, my organization reflects my community. The values of our organization reflects our community. We're actually trying to transform the material conditions of our community so that they can stop trauma dumping on us, so that they can actually live a very dignified life and a life that they deserve. And I just remember like one time this woman came to us and she's like, hey, and it's what you said earlier, like people are just really grateful. Like, people are just really grateful, and I try to shake people out of that. I'm just like, no, actually, you're owed. I mentioned this earlier that, like, this is sacred work. And as you mentioned, Lindsay, like, many of us are in the work that we are in because our ancestors bestowed upon us a responsibility that we choose every day, right? Like, I choose the responsibility of being a steward in my community because I could have easily been the Beyonce of Burien, but I'm not, right? Easily gonna be a performance, you know what I'm saying? But I'm not. Like, I'm in this role because my ancestors were like, girl, and I listened, right? I could have ran and been very, very unhappy at this moment. But I want to say to folks who are not in this work that I'm not asking you to be in this work, because it is not within all of us to be on the front lines in the capacities, right? Like, these are very, very cosmic things, very sacred things that we're doing. And it required a lot of our own internal healing. It requires a lot of self-awareness to be in the work at the level that we are in this work, right? And as a reminder, like, nonprofit is the tool that we use to be able to do this work under the cultural context of white supremacy, right? And so with that being said, I just ask people to do their own work, internal work, to learn how they show up in spaces. How can you show up in my community with the resources and the gifts that you have? Because we all have gifts that we're bringing to the table. And sometimes the first step is just to bear witness. Like, a lot of people are like, Roxana, tell us about this model. I'm like, I cannot tell you, I can show you. I can plop you at our distribution, and I just need you to witness what happens. And sometimes that's all it takes, is for people just to come in and to witness. And from there, they can transform the ways in which they want to participate and want to belong in a community. But that's my ask of people who are not in this work day to day, is to bear witness and to really cultivate that self-awareness that is needed, so that when you do enter communities, you're doing it in a way that is authentic and that aligns with the energy that people are trying to bring to this work.